Today is August 5th, 2026. My name is Rob Carrer of Kalamazoo Right to Life, and this is Pro-Life Week. Well, today's topic will be the results of the Michigan primary yesterday. And before I get too far into the weeds, I just want to mention that Right to Life for Michigan Political Action Committee really delivered yesterday. According to what I've read, 96% of all the candidates that Right to Life endorsed in the primary, 96% of them won their elections to be the nominee. Obviously the final elections going to be in November, but they won their races. 96%. That's a huge percentage. So let's just kind of go through some of these races. For governor, John James will be our pro-life candidate going against the radical pro-abortion Jocelyn Benson. And even in her victory speech last night, she made some reference to reproductive rights. And I did find it really kind of odd. She talks about her 10-year-old son wanting to grow up in a better world. I'm thinking, ma'am, didn't you get an ultrasound when you were pregnant with your 10-year-old son? Didn't you get an ultrasound? Didn't you see that little baby in your womb? Didn't you see that baby? Didn't it ever occur to you that little life in your womb had value? Didn't you think that? Anyway, obviously we don't think she did. But she's happy her son is alive, and they're all in favor of, tax benefits for daycares and things like that, which may be valid, but somehow the Democrats seem to cross that Rubicon. That if you're pregnant, the baby in the womb has no value, but the minute they're born, they all have great value. And I just have a hard time understanding that kind of mentality. Anyway, John James is going against Jocelyn Benson. And if, like I've said before several times, if the pro-life vote delivers in November, we will win. Because if, in the midterm election, in the last 10, 15-year cycles, Republican pro-life voters stay home in the midterms. They stay home. We have to vote, because if we vote, we win. If we don't vote, we lose, and Jocelyn Benson will become the next governor. Okay, so John James is our candidate for the U.S. Senate, even though he's not our endorsed candidate because he didn't even ask for it. Mike Rogers, who has historically been a strong pro-lifer, he was challenged by a minor candidate, and he won like 85% of the vote. So Mike Rogers is the conservative Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate. And we've all heard that if the Democrats want to maintain, or I should say, if the Democrats want to retake the Senate in November, they have to win Michigan. Gary Peters, the Democratic senator, is announced he's not running for re-election, so there's an open seat. So if Mike Rogers can win in November, that almost guarantees that the Republicans will continue to hold the Senate. And with that, our appointments for the Supreme Court and other federal courts. So it's important that the Republicans retain control of the U.S. Senate. And Mike Rogers, he only lost by like 18,000 votes last time against Elissa Slotkin. So he's known. He's a former congressman, former, I think, FBI agent, and he's got great credentials. And I think this may be the year that he's going to win, because he's going against this Democratic Socialists of America supporter, Abdul El-Sayed. He may not claim to be a socialist, but his policies are in line with these democratic socialists. He just is. And as I speak right now, it's about 2 in the afternoon on Wednesday, and I think he's probably going to beat Haley Stevens. I do think he's going to win. It's through the evening last night, he had a 15 percentage point lead, and it looked like he was going to just blow her out of the water. But as votes trickled in, I think most of his votes initially were coming from absentee ballots, and he had a clear advantage. But as votes began to come in, same-day voting, Stevens began to kind of chip away at his lead, 15, 10, 8%, 6%, 4%. And when I went to bed, it was like a 3% lead on his part. This morning, it was 1%. And she was down by about 15,000 votes. But Wayne County, which is her strong area of support, had 95% voter response. So there was still a sliver of votes out there that might have gone for her, but would it be enough to swing it away? I kind of doubt it. And so let's assume, for the sake of argument, that El Said is going to be the Democratic candidate. And he's anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. He's in favor of taxes, and I think he's in favor of federally funding public education, college education. Give me college education, free healthcare, free daycare. I mean, a lot of things. They sound great. They do. They sound great. Great free healthcare, free college education. They all sound great. But who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for my neighbor's child's college education, or your neighbor's, or your grandkids? Who's gonna pay for that? Or I agree that daycare is really expensive. It's way out of control. But who's going to pay for quality daycare? The taxpayer's going to pay for that. And I'm not really sure if it's fair for senior citizens who have no children or grandchildren going to college. Should their tax dollars be siphoned off to pay for college education? But to El Said, yes. Free college, free daycare, increased taxes on the rich and the middle class. It's going to be, they may big talk about taxing the rich, but there are not enough rich people in this state to cover all the policies, the government handouts that they want. So they're going to have to dip into taxing the middle class at all levels. So that's the Democratic candidate, Abdul El Said, the socialist. And does he want to abolish the Electoral College? Probably. Does he want to increase the Supreme Court? Probably. Does he want to, I'm losing track of some of these issues. Does he want to get rid of the presidency? Does he want to get rid of the Senate? Does he want to get rid of ICE? Does he want to get rid of funding the military? Does he want to get rid of the Pentagon? What does he want to get? What does he want to do? And that's a question the voters need to find out, because he is way, way too liberal, and he's too radical. Are the voters in Michigan willing to risk voting for him over a much more predictable Mike Rogers? And I really have a hard time believing that the Michigan voters are going to elect him, because he's a socialist. He is a socialist, and he is a radical anti-Semitic person. not just because he's Muslim, but just because he's a radical and he's very pro-abortion. And I don't know where he stands on the whole transgender stuff, but I'm assuming he supports transgender boys playing in girls' sports. I think he supports that. So on practically every issue, he's out of the mainstream. He really is. So Mike Rogers, though he's not endorsed, he's the person that we need to vote for over Abdul El-Sayed. Okay, so in some of the other races, Steve Carra won his race down in St. Joe County. Pauline Wenzel won her race in Van Buren County, or in that district. Steve Frisbee, who won his race in Calhoun County. The race for state senate over in the Van Buren area going toward Lake Michigan is a real cliffhanger between Kenny Clevenger and Chris Mariatis. So I'm not even sure how that's gonna finish, because I think those two candidates are only about 200 votes apart. So that's a nail biter. So I don't want to presume too much on that race, because both candidates, Clevenger and Mariatis, were endorsed by Right to Life. So we have no skin in the game, but let the voters decide. It's a conservative area, so whoever wins that race will become the next state senator in the Van Buren County area. So it was a good night. It was a good night for pro-lifers in Michigan. We have a good, solid pro-life candidate with John James. We have a solid pro-lifer, not endorsed, but solid pro-lifer in Mike Rogers. We have solid candidates in Steve Carra, Pauline Wenzel, Steve Frisbee, and the undecided race in Van Buren County. But you know, and I didn't mention Bill Huizenga, you know, and he won his race by like 85%. So I think he's gonna be reelected. This was a good night. I know the press wants to make a lot of hooey about, or hoopla, I should say, about the socialists are taking over the Democratic Party. And in this isolated race with El-Sayed, maybe they've got some momentum. But overall, the overall picture is pro-lifers have strong, winnable candidates this November. We just need to make sure that we vote for them. We need to vote in November. With that, I'll let you go, and I'll see you next time.